When a major earthquake hits, right, the seismographs just go completely wild.
Oh, yeah. The needles are jumping right off the paper.
Exactly. The automated alarms are blaring,
Yeah.
and the scientists looking at the screens are just, racing for total devastation. But then you walk outside and,
Nothing's falling down.
right, the buildings are standing, the traffic is moving normally. It's like the data on the screen completely contradicts the reality you can see with your own eyes on the ground.
It creates this really profound sense of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
You're just left standing on the sidewalk, looking at the data, wondering if the machine is completely broken, or if maybe the shockwave just hasn't reached you yet.
Yeah, and that feeling that waiting for a shockwave that doesn't seem to arrive, that is exactly what is happening right now with artificial intelligence and the global economy. So, welcome to our deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today is to figure out why the massive, technological capabilities of AI aren't toppling the economic buildings just yet. And more importantly, we're going to map out the exact evidence-based playbook for how you and your organization can actually survive when that shockwave finally does hit.
Because it is coming.
It is coming. And to do this, we are pulling from an extensive brand new paper by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover. He synthesizes this massive forecasting study from the Forecasting Research Institute. And we're talking about insights from 69 top economists and 52 AI experts.
Yeah, it's a huge data set. And what we're really looking at here is a critical gap.
Yeah.
The gap between what the technology can reliably do in a controlled laboratory and how it actually impacts the organizations that you interact with every single day.
Right.
The underlying tension in all of this research is really how human management either bottlenecks that potential.
Unleashes it.
Exactly.
Well, okay, let's unpack this because the core paradox here is just wild to me. The economists in the study looked at what they call a moderate progress scenario for AI by 2030, and they give this a 47% likelihood of happening.
So roughly a coin flip.
Yeah, almost a coin flip. And under this scenario, by 2030, AI systems could literally be managing semi-autonomous research labs. They could independently complete complex, 5-day software coding projects.
Which is a massive leap.
Right. We are talking about enabling physical robots to navigate our homes and perform tangible chores. Just massive sci-fi level leaps in capability.
And those are capabilities that far exceed what we consider cutting edge today. Right?
Yeah.
It fundamentally shifts the boundary of what machines can autonomously execute without us holding their hands.
But, and here's the crazy part, the economists predict that under this exact scenario, annualized GDP growth will barely budge.
Barely move at all.
They project it's going to sit around 2.5% by 2030. That is just a hair above the baseline from a few years ago. I mean, we are looking at a world where robots are doing our chores, they're running scientific labs, but the macroeconomy is just humming along at the exact same speed as before. How is that even mathematically possible?
Well, to understand that disconnect, we really have to look at how what economists call general-purpose technologies actually diffuse through an economy over time.
Okay.
There is almost always a multi-decade lag between when a revolutionary tech becomes available and when it actually makes an economy measurably more productive.
Think about electricity.
Okay, electricity. Right. It was widely available and understood in the 1880s.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't significantly boost manufacturing productivity until the 1920s.
Wait, a 40-year gap? That seems impossible. Why did it take 4 decades to just, plug things in?
Well, because you couldn't just drop an electric motor into a factory that was originally designed for steam power.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, steam-powered factories were built around one massive central drive shaft, usually vertically spanning multiple floors, with belts connecting every single machine to that one single power source. To use electricity effectively, organizations literally had to tear down those buildings.
Wow.
They had to fundamentally redesign their factory layouts into single-story horizontal lines, reorganize their entirely human workflows, and retrain all their people. And, we saw a very similar dynamic with personal computers in the 1980s.
Right, I remember that.
The technology was physically sitting on the desks, but the major national productivity spike didn't arrive until the late 1990s.
When the internet changed how they all communicated.
Jigu,
So
yeah.
merely possessing the tool doesn't make you faster. You have to change the entire architecture of how you work. And the data in our sources shows that right now, AI adoption is just wildly uneven across the board. Like in information services, adoption is up around 17.8%. But if you look at massive foundational sectors like healthcare and construction, it's below 3%. And large firms, they're adopting it 5 times faster than medium-sized ones.
What's fascinating here is the financial reality driving that uneven adoption. The research highlights this dynamic that we can call the 3-to-1
The
rule.
3-to-1 rule.
Yeah. For every single dollar an organization spends on the actual AI technology,
Mm.
so the software licenses, the raw models,
Yeah.
they are forced to spend $3 to $4 on complementary investments
Meaning the tech itself is actually the cheap part of the equation?
by a wide margin. The real cost is in upgrading legacy data infrastructure, auditing security, redesigning those workflows we just talked about, and crucially, retraining the human workforce to actually interact with the system.
It's like buying an expensive gym membership and expecting to wake up with a six-pack the next day.
That's a great way to put it.
Just having the tech, having the gym card in your wallet, it doesn't automatically mean you know how to flex the organizational muscles. Or like an organ transplant. You can't just drop a healthy new liver into a patient and expect them to go run a marathon.
No, absolutely not.
If you don't prep the patient with immunosuppressants, if you don't completely change their lifestyle and diet, the host body will literally attack and reject the new organ. The AI tech is the new organ. The workforce training and the organizational restructuring, that's the immunosuppressant. Without it, the company just rejects the tool.
And that organizational bottleneck is the exact mechanism explaining our paradox here. The economic data contradicts the technological hype because it takes years to restructure workflows and train human beings to use these tools effectively. The delay isn't a failure of the code,
Yeah.
It's a reflection of human and institutional friction.
Right. And that paints a picture of a slow, bumpy, but ultimately, I guess, manageable integration.
Generally, yes.
But what happens if the technology outpaces our human ability to adapt? Because the economists in this study also assign a 14% probability to a rapid progress scenario by 2030. And frankly, looking at the data, this part of the deep dive gets kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it is a low probability but extremely high impact tail risk. In this 14% scenario, AI capabilities advance so rapidly that we actually do see a massive surge in GDP growth.
So the engine does catch fire.
The economic engine catches fire. However, that boom comes at a severe structural cost to the workforce. The economists forecast that under this rapid acceleration, overall labor force participation could plummet from 62.6% down to 59.1%.
And just to anchor that to reality for everyone listening, a drop to 59.1% means a sudden loss of about 10 million jobs in just a handful of years.
Yeah, and the distributional effects of that kind of rapid displacement are really stark. The forecasting data suggests that wealth concentration could approach levels not seen since 1939.
Like right at the tail end of the Great Depression.
Exactly. The economists' projections show the wealthiest 10% of households potentially controlling 75% of the national wealth by 2030 in this specific scenario.
Which is just a staggering number to report. And we really have to pause and talk about what that displacement actually does to a human being, because the sources detail the lethal nature of sudden job loss. It's not just a temporary dip in a bank account.
No, it's far worse.
There is terrifying research showing the actual physical toll. When someone loses their job involuntarily, their mortality risk basically doubles in that first year.
Doubles.
Researchers tracking this have estimated that job displacement literally reduces a person's life expectancy by 1 to 1.5 years. And economically, even if they manage to find a new job, their wages tend to stay about 15% lower even 6 years down the line. I mean, the compounding stress, the loss of routine, the loss of healthcare access, it just breaks people.
It really does. The psychological and physiological consequences create this cascading crisis. It moves from an individual economic problem to a widespread public health issue very quickly.
Wait, I have to push back here. Hasn't the economy survived automation before? I mean, when factories automated or agriculture mechanized, people eventually just got new jobs. Why is this time so catastrophic that economists are worried about life expectancy dropping?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the danger really comes down to two unique factors, which are speed and geography. As we discussed with the factory analogy, manufacturing automation happened over decades.
Right.
Entire communities had a generation to adjust their educational systems and their local economies. But this 14% scenario, it envisions a transformation happening in under 5 years. The human system, our schools, our retraining pipelines, they simply cannot pivot their curriculums that quickly.
5 years is essentially tomorrow in macroeconomic terms.
Exactly. And the second compounding factor is white-collar vulnerability. Previous waves of automation primarily hit routine physical tasks.
Like assembly lines.
Right. But AI is targeting cognitive tasks, professional services, high-level knowledge work. And these specific jobs are heavily concentrated in major metropolitan areas with incredibly high costs of living.
Ah. So if a localized factory in a rural town closes, that is certainly bad for that town. But if hundreds of thousands of specialized knowledge workers in places like San Francisco, New York, or London lose their jobs simultaneously.
You trigger a cascading community crisis. These are professionals with highly specialized, suddenly non-transferable skills. I mean, imagine an accountant whose specific financial analysis tasks are entirely automated overnight.
They can't just pivot to a new industry with the exact same salary.
They really can't. And when they lose their incomes in a high-cost city, they can't pay their mortgages. You see immediate housing crises, which then causes a massive drop in local service sector jobs. The restaurants, the dry cleaners, the retail stores, because all that localized spending completely dries up.
Wow. Okay, so since that rapid displacement scenario is so destructive, how are companies actually integrating AI right now to try and avoid this cliff? Because the data shows a massive divide between the companies doing it right and those doing it terribly, the whole, integration reality check.
The performance gap across the corporate landscape is just staggering right now.
Hmm.
Early adopters of AI see an average productivity growth of 3 to 4%,
Well, yes.
but that average completely hides the real story playing out on the ground.
Right, because underneath that average, about 40% of organizations adopting AI see absolutely zero meaningful productivity improvement. Nothing.
Nothing at all.
But the top quartile of implementers, they are seeing productivity gains exceeding 10%. So if you're a business leader listening to this, what is the secret sauce separating the 10% winners from the 0% losers?
It comes entirely down to their deployment philosophy. The sources cite this really fascinating study by economist Eric Brynjolfsson on customer service operations.
Oh, yeah, I read this.
Yeah. When companies deployed AI tools and paired them with substantial training for their human agents, actually giving the human the discretion to use the tool as an assistant issue resolution increased by 14%, and customer satisfaction went up 25%.
But what about the companies that just, threw the AI at the wall to cut costs?
Well, those who deployed AI simply as a cheap labor substitute, without redesigning the workflow or training the staff, achieved almost no productivity gains. And the mechanism here is critical, right? They ended up with angry customers trying to navigate a rigid, unhelpful automated system and incredibly frustrated human agents who were only brought in to clean up the mess when the AI failed.
And without having the authority to actually fix the underlying issue.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's like handing a teenager the keys to a Formula One car without driving lessons.
That's perfect, yeah.
Of course they're going to crash. The defining characteristic of that top quartile of companies is that they utilize automation strategies emphasizing worker augmentation rather than replacement. They recognize that the tech without training is basically a liability. The AI tool's potential depends entirely on the workforce's ability to steer it.
Absolutely.
So if workforce training is the differentiator between a 10% productivity boom and a 0% bust, what does a successful corporate retraining playbook actually look like? Because we aren't just talking about making employees watch a couple of mandatory online video modules.
Not at all. The economists in the study identified systemic job retraining as their absolute top policy recommendation. They calculated that robust structural retraining programs could theoretically save 2.76 million workers from dropping out of the labor force in that rapid progress scenario we discussed earlier.
Almost 3 million lives structurally saved. And we have concrete examples of companies executing this right now, like Salesforce and their Pathfinder program. A few years ago, they realized AI was going to severely reduce the demand for certain routine CRM roles. But instead of just waiting to fire those people, they identified the at-risk roles early. They mapped out adjacent skills those employees already had, and they successfully transitioned about 80% of the targeted employees into completely new technical positions.
And that early identification and mapping process is really crucial to understand. They didn't just look at a job title. They looked at the underlying meta skills.
Meta skills.
Yeah. A customer service representative might use the specific software, but their actual valuable meta skill is complex problem solving, empathetic de-escalation, navigating ambiguous client needs. Salesforce mapped those human meta skills to new AI-augmented roles rather than just discarding the employee because their old software became obsolete.
Amazon's Career Choice program is another fascinating model here, too. They are literally prepaying 95% of tuition, up to $12,000 a year, for their employees to get credentials in high-demand fields, even if those fields are completely outside of Amazon's corporate structure.
Which is incredible. It's an acknowledgement that real financial support is the mechanism for meaningful transition. Training programs without deep financial backing have drastically lower completion rates because employees simply cannot afford the time away from earning.
Right.
And when displacement is ultimately unavoidable, transparency becomes the most critical tool a company has. IBM, for example, gave a 3-year advance notice for AI-driven layoffs.
3 entire years. I mean, that
Mhm.
completely changes the psychological dynamic of a layoff. You aren't just handed a cardboard box on a random Friday afternoon and told to clear your desk. You have a multi-year runway to develop new skills while still earning a paycheck.
It's a game changer.
And Accenture did something similar, right? They replaced 3,000 back office workers with AI automation, but they offered them alternative internal roles, structured external placement, or, and this is wild to me, actual seed capital to start their own independent consultancies.
Yeah, and this raises an important question, which brings us to a foundational element of organizational psychology called procedural justice. The fairness of the process matters just as much as the outcome itself.
Let's play devil's advocate for a second, though. What does this all mean for the bottom line? Does a company actually have an obligation to save every single job, to give out 3-year runways and seed capital? In a fast-moving, hyper-competitive economy, isn't that just objectively bad business?
Well, it's not about saving every job, and it's not about charity for the departing workers. It is fundamentally about the
The
survivors.
survivors.
Yeah, there is a well-documented phenomenon called layoff survivor syndrome. The organizational commitment, the daily performance, and the retention of the remaining employees strongly depends on how they witness their departing colleagues being treated.
Oh, wow. I see the mechanism there. If I watch my company treat my friend terribly, my own productivity tanks because my brain is suddenly consumed with anxiety. I know I might be next.
Exactly. You lose psychological safety. Instead of spending your cognitive load figuring out how to optimize the new AI tool, you spend 40% of your workday updating your resume, networking, and scanning the horizon for your own pink slip.
Right.
If the layoff process lacks procedural fairness, if it's sudden, unexplained, and cruel, the survivors actively disengage. Performance deteriorates, and your absolute best remaining talent voluntarily quits because they have options elsewhere. So, treating displaced workers with dignity is actually a selfishly brilliant business strategy to preserve the morale of the exact people you need to run your new automated systems.
So for those employees who do stay, who survive the transition and are now tasked with running these systems, their jobs are going to look completely different. How are these top-tier organizations actually designing the roles of the future? Because we are really entering the era of the human AI cyborg organization.
The cyborg organization, I like that. The focus shifts heavily toward developing strategic, human complementary roles. The goal is to pair the machine's computational speed and pattern recognition with human judgment, ethical reasoning, and contextual understanding.
So AI becomes the ultra-fast calculator, but the human is the mathematician deciding which equation actually matters to the customer.
Precisely.
We see this playing out perfectly in healthcare right now. Forward-thinking hospitals aren't firing their radiologists. They are creating AI liaison roles. The AI acts as the calculator, instantly flagging the standard scans and highlighting potential tumors. But the experienced human radiologist supervises the edge cases, the weird anomalies the AI hasn't seen before, and communicates those terrifying diagnoses to a frightened patient with actual empathy.
Empathy is key. And we see a similar model at USAA in the financial services sector. They deployed bots to handle all the routine, straightforward account inquiries.
Like checking balances.
Right. But rather than pocketing the savings by firing staff, they freed up resources to create specialized financial advocate roles. These human advocates step in to handle complex, emotionally charged situations like military deployments, sudden disability claims, or survivor benefits. An AI can calculate a payout instantly, but it cannot replicate genuine human empathy and complex problem solving for a family in a crisis.
Or look at IBM's consultants. As generative AI took over the routine data crunching and the initial generation of massive reports, their consultants didn't just disappear. They shifted their daily focus up the value chain toward design thinking, executive coaching, and high-level strategic advisory work.
Right. Thriving in this cyborg organization requires a shift in what we value. The essential capabilities, what the research calls those meta skills, are cross-functional coordination, emotional intelligence, and most importantly, judgment in ambiguity. AI is excellent at clear rules. Humans are required when the rules contradict each other.
But to support that kind of high-level human judgment, organizations have to cultivate cultures of psychological safety. Google's internal research famously found that psychological safety, The feeling that you can experiment, pitch a wild idea, and fail without being punished is the single strongest predictor of team success. If you want people to steer the AI compass, they have to feel safe grabbing the wheel.
And you have to actually give them the time to experiment. The sources highlight Atlassian's Ship It days. They give employees 24 hours a quarter to just drop their normal tasks, work on any project, explore new skills, and experiment with new tools. You cannot expect a workforce to master an alien technology if they are constantly drowning in their standard daily deliverables.
Right. You also have to decentralize the leadership. Look at ING Bank. They eliminated their traditional rigid hierarchies and moved to autonomous squads. By pushing decision-making authority down to the actual teams doing the work, they cut their internal decision times by 30 to 50%.
That's massive.
In an environment defined by rapid technological change, waiting for approval from 5 layers of management to try a new software prompt is a literal death sentence for a company.
It really is. And finally, the most successful integrations connect the technology back to a core human purpose. The data highlights Patagonia's approach to warehouse automation.
Oh, I love this example.
Yeah, when they brought in automated systems, they didn't frame it to their employees as a mechanism for replacing their packing jobs. They framed it as a tool to free up human time so those employees could be retrained in quality control and environmental advocacy, which is the company's actual mission. They connected this scary new tech to a higher shared purpose, and employee engagement stayed incredibly high.
Which is brilliant. So bringing this all together for you, listening right now, whether you are managing a team of 50 or just trying to manage your own career trajectory, the big takeaway from Dr. Westover's synthesis of all these economists and AI experts is this. The economic impact of AI is not predetermined by the code.
No, it's not.
It is determined entirely by human management. The massive productivity gains, the 10% boosts versus the zeros, they completely depend on how you integrate the tech with the people. You need to look at your own daily work right now. Find those meta skills, the complex judgment, the empathy, the strategic thinking that a machine cannot fake. Do not treat AI as a replacement tool. Treat it as an engine that augments your uniquely human abilities.
It really requires active engagement and a continuous growth mindset. As we discussed with the earthquake analogy at the very beginning, you cannot just stand outside watching the seismograph, hoping the building doesn't fall on you. You have to be the one actively designing the earthquake-proof foundation.
Exactly. We've spent this deep dive talking about how forward-thinking organizations can design these incredible human-AI hybrid roles, these cyborg organizations. But here's the thought I want to leave you with today. If your organization is part of the 40% that gets this entirely wrong, are you just sitting there waiting for them to tell you you're at risk?
Well,
Or are you already writing the job description for your own AI-augmented future? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.